I met my new girlfriend at my former wife's grave. Now I hate myself and don't know what I should do. I know how this sounds, but I met my new girlfriend at my late husband's grave. And now I can't look at myself in the mirror. It all started because I offered his tombstone a tuna sandwich. Yeah, I get how ridiculous that sounds. But let me explain. Ben and I had our first date on the beach. We didn't plan anything fancy, just picked a spot near the pier and laid out a blanket. I asked if he liked tuna. He said sure, so I brought sandwiches. That became our thing. We'd hit the same spot every month, always with tuna in the basket. Rain or shine. On our first anniversary, we came back to that same stretch of sand. I passed him a sandwich like always, and he paused. I gotta confess, he said. Tuna? It's disgusting. Like, full-body wretch level disgusting. But I ate it that first time because I didn't want to ruin the vibe. I blinked. Then why did you keep eating it for a year? I didn't want to hurt your feelings, he said, shrugging. You cut the crusts off and everything. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on mine. After that, it became a joke between us. Every time I brought tuna, I'd offer him the first bite. He'd pretend to gag, and we'd both laugh. Then last year, he died. On Valentine's Day. He was speeding home from work. I'd made dinner. I was waiting by the window. He never showed. 3 months passed, and I barely left the couch. Until one sunny afternoon, I grabbed the old basket, packed some tuna, and just drove. Ben's grave is tucked under a crooked oak tree at the top of the cemetery hill. I laid out the red blanket, set the basket down, and without thinking, I said, "You want the first bite?" Then I laughed, genuinely laughed, for the first time since the accident. So I kept going back. Every clear day, same blanket, same basket, same terrible sandwich. It gave me something to look forward to, some kind of peace. One day in August, I was spreading out the blanket when the wind yanked it right out of my hands. It tumbled down the hill and smacked straight into someone else. I rushed over to apologize. There she was. Red curls, pale skin, wide-set green eyes, and this half-smile like she was used to forgiving people for dumb things. Her name was Dana. She was visiting her brother's grave, Mark, she said. I only remembered the name because he shared it with Ben's old coworker. We ended up chatting. Just small talk. Nothing heavy. But the next few times I visited, I saw her again. Same spot. Always alone. Eventually, we started waving. Then one afternoon, as I packed up my things, she walked over. Mind if I walk you to your car? I didn't. We chatted as we strolled. Just the usual, how often we came, how long it had been. Then she glanced at my basket and said, "So, you showing off your lunch to the dead or something?" I grinned and told her the whole story. The tuna joke. The crusts. All of it. Dana listened, nodded, and said, "That's beautiful. Morbid, but beautiful." Then she looked me right in the eye and asked, "Do you ever think grief makes people holy? Like, you feel closer to the sky when you're hurting?" I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. At that exact moment, another gust of wind blew her scarf halfway across the path. She chased it like a kid, flapping her arms and laughing. I laughed too. Then I asked her if she wanted to grab coffee sometime. That night, I cried so hard I soaked my pillow. It felt wrong, like I was cheating on a ghost. When I told my best friend about Dana, she hugged me and said, "You're not replacing Ben. You're still here. You're allowed to live." Even my dad, who doesn't believe in grief counseling or air fryers, said, "You've been visiting that grave so much you're starting to look like a ghost yourself." So, I kept seeing Dana. Coffee turned into walks. Walks turned into dinner. Dinner turned into long nights where we didn't talk about the people we lost, but just breathed. She didn't talk much about Mark. Said it was still too raw. Said the accident messed her up for months. I understood that. Not every scar has to be shared out loud. One night after dinner, she stayed over. Not planned. We were watching a movie, and by the time it ended, the streets were foggy. I offered the couch. She took my bed. The next morning, after she left, I sat in the shower until the water ran cold. It hit me. This wasn't just coffee anymore. I was in something. I stopped going to Ben's grave after that. I couldn't bear to face him. Not with Dana's smell still on my skin. I kept telling myself it was okay. That I hadn't betrayed Ben. That life moves forward, whether you want it to or not. But then came Valentine's Day. The 1-year mark. Of the crash. Of the dinner that never got eaten. Of the knock on the door and the cop who couldn't meet my eyes. I'd planned to spend the day alone. Quietly. No calls. No texts. Just me and a red blanket on a cold hill. But Dana. She asked me how we should spend it. She said, I know it might be a sensitive day, but I'd like to do something. With you. I froze. That quiet part of me, the part that still slept on Ben's side of the bed. It screamed, you can't. But the louder, lonelier part whispered, it's time. So I made a plan. I'd go visit Ben in the morning. Tell him everything. Then I'd spend the afternoon with Dana. I just had to do it right. Make it honest. And pray he'd understand wherever he was. That morning, the sky was moody. Gray clouds but no rain. I packed the basket like I always did. 2 tuna sandwiches. A thermos of coffee. And, because I wanted to do this right, a folded letter. I poured my heart onto that paper. How I hadn't meant to fall again. How I still loved him in ways I couldn't explain. How meeting Dana wasn't about forgetting, but surviving. When I got to the cemetery, the wind had picked up again. Like the weather knew. I knelt beside a stone and laid out the blanket. Pulled out the thermos, unscrewed the cap, and I broke. The sobs hit before the first word left my mouth. I cried so hard I couldn't see the stone. I just pressed my forehead to it and said, I'm sorry. I told him about Dana. About how guilty I felt. About how I still expected to see him in my dreams, even if he never showed. And as I spoke, I felt it. A kind of peace. Like he was saying, it's okay. I get it. I know. I even chuckled a little. Because the wind blew my napkin into a puddle and I could almost hear Ben muttering, typical. That's when I remembered. I'd never met Dana's brother. Mark Mary, she'd said. I figured since I was already here, maybe I could stop by. Introduce myself. Tell him his sister was the kindest woman I'd met in years. So I packed up the basket and walked down the hill, scanning for his name. The grave Dana always stood near? It wasn't Mark's. It was the Presleys. A married couple. No Mary in sight. I circled the area. Checked the other rows. Nothing. Confused, I made my way to the groundskeeper's shed. Harry, sweet old Harry who always smelled like cut grass and peppermint, dug through a binder and said, Mary, you said? Mark Mary, I replied. Harry squinted. Mary. We only have one Mary in this section. A Christian Mary. Far end. Section C. Christian. I asked. He nodded. And when did he pass? Harry pointed at the date in the log. October 6th. 2 months after Dana and I met. Are you sure? I maintain every headstone in this place. I'm sure. That couldn't be right. She said she'd lost her brother. That she'd been grieving. But if he died after we met, why was she already visiting the grave? Why was she standing by a stranger's headstone? That night, I tried to keep things light. But over dinner, I asked, as casually as I could. Hey, just curious. Where exactly is your brother buried? She froze. Fork halfway to her mouth. Why? No reason. I just thought I might say hi. I visited Ben today and... Her voice dropped. He's further down the hill. Further down? I tilted my head. I thought you always stood near. I didn't like being too close, okay? She snapped. Then she stood and started collecting plates. Don't interrogate me, she muttered. You don't know what it's like. I let it go. For that night. But my gut wouldn't. It itched. And when your gut itches like that, you either scratch it or it drives you insane. The next day, when Dana said she was going out, just for some air, I waited 5 minutes and then followed her. Sunglasses. Hoodie. Baseball cap. I looked ridiculous. But I followed her past the usual path. Past the oak tree. Down the winding trail to the far side of the cemetery. She didn't go to Christian Mary's grave. She didn't go to any grave. She sat alone on a wooden bench and waited. A man with a shaggy beard walked up. They talked. They laughed. At one point, she touched his knee. He touched her shoulder. And then, they kissed. It was awkward. Unplanned. Like two people who weren't sure if they should, but did anyway. I didn't confront her. Didn't scream. Didn't cry. I just walked away. And I felt relief. Isn't that sick? Like I'd earned it. Like I deserved to be cheated on. Like I'd betrayed Ben first, and now this was karma. I didn't say anything to Dana that night. Not when she got home. Not when she kissed my cheek like nothing had happened. I just nodded, smiled, pretended, but my head was a beehive of thoughts. Loud, swarming, impossible to silence. Had she ever really lost a brother? Was anything she said true? And if not, what the hell was she doing at the cemetery in the first place? There's something uniquely awful about doubting someone who once brought you back to life. Because I wasn't just doubting Dana. I was doubting myself, my decisions, my grief, my healing. Still, I told myself, just get through Valentine's Day. It was the 1-year anniversary, and I knew I couldn't handle both that and a confrontation. So I waited to grieve, waited to fall apart properly, waited to maybe put the last nail in whatever Dana and me had become. That morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I dressed slow, like I was dragging memories onto my back. Then I packed my usual things. A red blanket, 2 tuna sandwiches, a thermos of coffee, and a small box of Emma's favorite pastries. I reached the door when Dana's voice rang from upstairs. "Babe, can you come up here?" I hesitated. "Everything okay?" "There's a huge spider in the bathroom." Now, this wasn't new. Dana hated spiders, but something about her voice. I don't know. It felt flat, performed. Still, I went. "No spider." "Must have scurried off," she said with a tight smile, then handed me my keys. I nodded, said thanks, and left. At the cemetery, the air was still. No wind this time. Just that strange, quiet kind of cold that slips into your chest. I walked to Emma's grave, laid down the blanket, and sat cross-legged in front of the stone. And then I started talking. Not in a performative way. Not like a confession. More like a conversation. One I should have had a long time ago. I told her about Dana. About the coffee shop. The laughs. The guilt. About the awkward kiss in the grave that wasn't her brother's. I said I didn't know what I was doing anymore. That maybe trying to move on had been a mistake. That maybe I wasn't supposed to be okay. And then I offered Emma the first bite of the sandwich. As always. But this time, something was wrong. The moment I bit into mine, I felt it. Not in my mouth. In my chest. A sharp pressure. Like I'd swallowed a stone. I coughed. Then again. Then harder. My lungs shrank like someone had tied strings around them. I grabbed the thermos, spilled hot coffee down my shirt. Tried to breathe. My hands shook. My fingers fumbled across the grass. I looked around, desperate, terrified, until there she was. Dana. Just standing there. Arms crossed. Watching. I tried to say her name, but my voice came out broken. I clawed at the air. Pointed at my throat. She walked slowly toward me, kneeling beside the blanket. She picked up my sandwich. And without blinking, she shoved more of it into my mouth. I tried to turn away. She held my face. "It's okay," she whispered. "Just swallow." My body screamed. My lungs baked. But my arms were jelly. My legs gone. Then she whispered, almost lovingly. "You're not the first, you know." She gently brushed hair from my forehead. "But you were the sweetest." "The tuna thing?" That really touched me. She smiled. "Most men can't love dead women the way you do." Her hand drifted toward the second sandwich. I finally found strength in my jaw and bit her finger. "Hard." She yelped. Pulled away. Blood bloomed from the nail. Her eyes narrowed. Without a word. She pinched my nose shut. I gasped, reflexively, and she grabbed a wad of tuna, ready for the opening. But I twisted, thrashed, rolled sideways down the hill. The back of my skull hit stone. My breath returned in bursts. I looked up. Dana stood at the top, framed by Emma's headstone. I reached for anything. My hand gripped a rock. Then, just as she lunged, I kicked. She stumbled. Her head slammed into the stone. A dull crack. And then silence. Dana lay crumpled at the base of Emma's headstone. Blood ran from her scalp in a slow line, curving over the word beloved. She wasn't moving. I didn't know if she was unconscious or dead. I didn't wait to find out. I crawled backward through the grass, gasping, gagging, still wheezing from whatever she'd shoved into that sandwich. My chest felt like it had been through a paper shredder. Somewhere below the hill, voices rose. People shouting. I turned. There was a funeral procession at the far side of the cemetery. Black coats, veils, folding chairs, a priest. And here I was, blood on my shirt, wild-eyed, dragging myself through the dirt like a lunatic. I stumbled straight into the path of the mourners. A woman screamed. Someone dropped a bouquet. I must have looked feral, grass-stained, shaking, sandwich bits on my lips. The priest ran over. Sir, what happened? Are you hurt?" I tried to speak. My voice failed. He looked at my face, saw the blue tinge forming around my lips, and turned to the crowd. "Someone call an ambulance." I passed out before I heard the sirens. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. White walls. For drip. The smell of antiseptic and cafeteria food. A nurse leaned over me, smiling. You're okay. You're lucky. Do you remember what happened? I croaked something about the cemetery. The sandwich. Then I asked, did anyone check the grave? She looked confused. Someone tried to kill me, I said. Her face changed. She stepped outside. Moments later, a detective came in. He had a clipboard and tired eyes. They'd run a toxicology screen. The sandwich had been laced with fentanyl. Enough to kill me twice over. The detective sat beside the bed and laid down a photo. My picnic basket. Inside, folded neatly next to the coffee flask, was an envelope addressed in my handwriting. I blinked. That's not mine. He slid it open. The letter was chilling. A full-page suicide note, written as if from me. It said I couldn't live without Emma. Said no one could ever replace her. Said I'd poison myself to join her in death. It was convincing. My style. My penmanship. But it wasn't mine. My hands started to shake again. I didn't write that, I whispered. She planted it. She. Dana. The detective hesitated. Your partner. Check the sandwich. Her fingerprints will be on it. She shoved it in my mouth. He scribbled in his notebook. Then I asked, almost in a whisper, Is she dead? He looked at me carefully. She's in custody. That was a relief, for about 3 seconds. Then the rage hit. Not just at her, but at myself. For being stupid enough to fall for the perfect stranger in a cemetery. For trusting someone I met while I was shattered. For letting her into my life. My bed. My house. Into the sacred space I'd built around Emma's memory. And that's when it clicked. The man at the bench. The one Dana had met. The one she kissed. I described him to the detective. He nodded. We spoke with him. Name's Gavin. Works maintenance at a local marina. Says he met Dana last year, a few months ago. I sat up straighter. Did she say anything about me? About her last boyfriend. The detective flipped through his notes. She told Gavin her boyfriend, you, died of suicide. That she visits your grave every few days. The words hit like a hammer to the chest. She thought I was dead? She told him you were dead. Gavin said he met her at your grave. Thought she was grieving. I stared at the ceiling. She tried to kill me to make that lie come true. He nodded. The silence stretched long and cold. Then I asked the question I'd been avoiding. Has she done this before? The detective hesitated. That's under investigation. But you think so? He nodded slowly. There are patterns. Jesus Christ, I muttered. He placed a hand on the file. You were lucky, he said. You were the first to fight back. When I was discharged, the first place I went wasn't home. It was Emma's grave. I stood there in silence for almost an hour. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just stood. And when I finally looked down, someone had been there before me. At the base of the headstone was a tuna sandwich, wrapped in wax paper, crust cut off, a single dill pickle inside, the same way I used to make it. But I hadn't made it. I didn't leave it. No one else should have known. And Dana was in custody. Or was she? I took a step back, scanned the cemetery. Every tree, every stone, every path. Nothing. But I felt it. A chill. The same one I felt the day we met. When my blanket blew down the hill. When she smiled and touched Emma's name. I took one last look at the sandwich. Then I left. And I haven't been back since. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I checked into a cheap motel just off the highway. The kind of place with flickering neon signs and chain locks that don't inspire much confidence. But it felt safer than my own house. I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing her face. The way Dana looked as she forced that sandwich into my mouth. Not angry. Not hateful. Just calm. Almost tender. Like a nurse helping a patient swallow their last pill. That's what haunted me most. Not the pain. Not the betrayal. But the affection behind it. The police kept me updated in short, frustrating bursts. Dana hadn't said much during interrogation. She called me confused. Said I'd been spiraling since Emma's death. That I had probably written the note myself and forgotten. But the fentanyl in my system? The forged handwriting? The witness statements? They started piling up, like bricks in a slow, meticulous wall. And then came the bombshell. A cold case officer found a matching MO. Different city. Different man. Also widowed. Also met Dana at a cemetery. He died just months after their relationship began. Cause of death? Suicide by overdose. Left behind a note that friends swore wasn't his voice. Same ink. Same phrasing. And tucked into his pocket? A tuna sandwich. I wish I could say they locked her up and threw away the key. But the system doesn't work that way. She lawyered up. Posted bail. The charges are still pending. And in the meantime, she's out. Free. Living somewhere out of state, supposedly. But I don't trust that. I changed my locks. Installed cameras. Moved to a new apartment where no one knows my name. And I keep a list of the places I might spot her. Cemeteries. Grief support groups. Memorial walls. Anywhere sorrow gathers like rain in the gutter. Because that's where she thrives. She doesn't pick her victims randomly. She waits. Waits for you to break. Waits for the grief to make you soft. Then she offers you warmth and slowly folds herself into your emptiness. She knows how to mirror pain. She feeds on it until your sadness becomes her cover and your death becomes her story. I still visit Emma, but only in memory. Never at the grave. Not since I found that sandwich. The cops never figured out how it got there. They searched visitor logs, camera footage, nothing. No witnesses. No prints. Just wax paper and dread. Sometimes, I lie awake at night, wondering. Was I just unlucky? Or was I targeted? Was there something about me she knew? That I didn't know myself? Was my love for Emma so visible? So pure? That it drew her like a moth to flame? Or did I just look easy to erase? I got a message 2 weeks ago. It was anonymous. No caller ID. No subject line. Just a single sentence in the email. Tell Emma I said hi. No signature. No context. But I knew. It was her. It always is. So if you're listening, and you've recently lost someone, if you're still in that raw space where everything hurts, and a stranger with sad eyes tells you they understand, be careful. She doesn't care about your heart, only how to stop it. She'll fold into your grief like wind under a picnic blanket. And by the time you notice the chill, it's already too late.